Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jesus, and your team, Jeff, of course, and Corgan, Lake Flato, Keith, John, and Joe. Thank you for your work here today. I'm very excited about this. I'm trying to contain my excitement so I don't look like a crazy person, but I'm extremely excited about this. Thanks also to John Dixon and his committee for the work that you've done. As I mentioned, I am incredibly excited about this. As I look over at the renderings that you put up on the side of the room, the modern feel of it is very exciting. Just the aesthetic of it, I think, is going to be great for the city, but there's so much more than just the way it's going to look. It's a functionality. It's so much that y'all have already put into the work. And also, I want to commend you for the extensive community outreach that you did, 100,000 plus responses. I would love to get that kind of response for questions that I have of my community, so I do really appreciate that work that you've already done up front to make sure the community has been involved. The project is, well, this is one of the most important projects that our city is doing right now. It's top 3, if not the most important. This project will change the way visitors see our city, the way we see ourselves. Jesus, you called this airport the airport of the future. And we heard today that this is the airport that San Antonio deserves. And all those things are true. I want to remind everybody, though, that this is in no way a luxury. This is a necessity. We absolutely have to do this. As our population grows, for a lot of other reasons, not the least of which you mentioned, Jesus, is to be more competitive. So I think that's really key here, is we're not building the future for today. I mean, I think you mentioned we're looking 2040 and beyond. Your presentation today gives me, our community, a visual goal. I remember we went out to the airport and we stood out and I looked at where it was, the proposed area was going to be, and it was kind of hard to visualize. So it's exciting, again, to hear you guys talk about how it's actually going to look. It really gives us that visual to reach for. We talk about San Antonio having a world-class airport, one that will spark economic development, and we talk about the time and investment it will take to reach that goal. And this is not the first step. You've been working on it a long time, but this is a first, maybe public step, and gives us a really clear finish line. So I like, when I have a goal, I like to see the end result. I like to visualize it, and I think that's what you've done here. So I appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions real quickly. Has there been any work done to evaluate the economic impact to the city once this project is complete?
Well, we did have plans to try and do an economic impact study. In 2020. Of course, COVID hit us, so we really did not want to do one. We're waiting probably another 12, 14 months before we feel like we have a full resumption of service. There's still a lot of volatility in the market and uncertainty that we have to get through. In 2018, an economic study was performed. $5.2 billion was our overall economic impact to the airport. So it's an engine to the city, which is why it's so important that we continue to work towards the expansion and the growth of what we're doing.
And can you talk a little more about the federal funds that we've both received, and then federal funds that we can advocate for as well? I'd like to advocate for more federal funding for this.
It's the first time in history where the Federal Aviation Administration has provided, funding for vertical projects as it relates to the terminal projects. So the bipartisan infrastructure law is an incredible opportunity. In 2022, we did not receive funding. There's a number of airports. I want to emphasize the importance that there are different sizes for large hubs versus medium hubs. So medium hubs do not have the opportunity to obtain as much funding as large hubs, just for the sheer nature of the employment volume that goes into those large hubs. We feel with the ground loading facility, we will be very competitive in 2023. We anxiously await the disposition of the FAA's responses as it relates to that. 2024, 2025, and 26, we will continue to compete for those for all the work that we will be doing into this new terminal complex.
As I mentioned, this is one of the most important projects that the city is working on now, so anything that I can do to help advocate for additional federal funding, please keep me in the loop on that so I can help
Yes,
out
ma'am.
in any way. I know I keep calling you to transportation, our Transportation Mobility Committee, for updates on this project, and of course, the next 10 months, as I saw from the Gantt chart, is going to be very crucial. Can you talk about, I don't know, maybe just pull up the Gantt chart if you wouldn't mind.
Slide 12. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
While you're doing that, what my question really revolves around what other support you might need as we, especially in the beginning, there looks like a lot of work that's up front, right? Here in this oval that you have. And then as of 2025, that's construction, right?
Correct.
By the way, I think this is an incredibly short time frame. It's good. We want to see it complete. But what else can we do to support you within that oval?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Councilwoman. From our standpoint, you think back of when the Strategic Development Program was launched in 2018, even before my arrival, and the hard work that people put in to get that completed, to have a 10-year master plan, but not just a 10-year, but to look out over the next 20 years that took us into 2040. The work that we've done, a lot of hard work has happened between 2020 and where we stand today in the early days of 2023. So we know that we have set the foundation, as I mentioned earlier. This work is critical to our success, but we're able to begin to move forward as it relates to the environmental work, as it relates to bringing on a construction manager at risk, as it relates to bringing on the master architect that's going to help us get through this design work. And then the speed of being able to communicate with you all with frequency, to be able to come to B sessions and communicate and share with you where we're at, and have the dialogue of the wishes and the wants of as we continue to move forward. We also communicate with a number of different chambers, a number of different groups and committees, as you related to your transportation committee. We'll continue to do that as we go forward. So we will be continuous in our effort to have these communications.
Great. One final question about the energy efficient aspect to the design. And I know that the design might change a little bit between now and actual construction, but can you talk a little bit about the green energy portion of this?
I will, as long as you watch my back, because my team is going to say, you better not go up there and say that we're going to be specifically.
Okay.
We have a lot of work. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do with that. Okay. We do know that, it's important for us. As I mentioned earlier, under the Airport Council International, we have started the mapping of what that's going to look like. There's 6 levels to that. As we start to move forward, whether it's the work that we're doing, and we have a grant that we're going to be receiving, we will be moving to electrified busing operations. So we're in the process of moving that. How do we add additional power with the solar panels? We have already taken the initial steps and have already worked with our airlines on all of our, what we call our GSEs, our ground support equipment. This is all of the ground support equipment that sits in the ramp areas is already electrified as well. Okay. So we continue to do those efforts and initiatives, and as those come to us, the team is extremely creative. As I mentioned to you earlier, there's no shortage of passion and commitment. They're hitting me at all hours of the day. Hey, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this.
Great.
And our ability to speed, to move, and communicate that with you all is critical.
I'm thankful to hear that it is top of mind for you, that's something that you're working on. And I'm going to keep calling you to Transportation and Mobility for updates on this development. I know that I mentioned the next 10 months is going to be crucial. I want to keep you invite you to come to transportation for 3 big reasons. One, to keep the airport top of mind. I want to make sure that we're all continuing to talk about it. To keep us accountable to our master plan and of course to our communities and in keeping them informed of what's going on. And third, I also want to know how we can help in the execution of the development of plans. So the question I asked about, what's inside the oval, I want to keep that conversation going. I'm sure those needs are going to change. I think that everybody should be excited about the airport development, the impact that it's going to have on our community, businesses, both large and small, our families, neighbors. There's a saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. I believe that this project is that rising tide for our city. And I'm overusing the word excited, but I can't express enough how hopeful I am about this project. So thank you for the update.
Very good.
Did you have something to add?
I'm going to let Tim O'Cronley,
yes,
our
please.
Deputy Director, talk a little bit about the environmental piece.
Please.
I just want to give you a good example of that environmental piece, and Joe touched on it, but we looked at the Paseo in front of the terminal. Well, airports generate a lot of water, whether it's water from the facility itself with gray water, but we have a lot of concrete, so there's a lot of watershed. So if we're able to capture that from a sustainability point and utilize it to take care of those plants and other features on that Paseo, that will be one good example that we'll look at. Terminal design, and Corrigan can speak better to this than me, but new smart glasses and just general design have come a long way since we built Terminal A. So we'll look at that. We'll make that a core feature as we're moving forward for sustainability and accessibility.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I'll add to that, just because we talked a little bit about it. One of the things that we're going to always try and do is look at what those passive strategies are first, because we used to, we built houses and we lived in San Antonio without air conditioning, and that was because we built with our environment, in tune with our environment. And one of the things that we're going to always try and do with the airport as we look at it is how do we take advantage of those low-hanging fruit? How do we make the right choices and decisions that are passive? They're not costly, but then we're also going to look at, once we've gotten that building, that made all the right choices about the building, then we can start to look at what are the green energy options, what are the performance needs, all of those things. But first is always trying to take advantage of those passive ideas and strategies, much like the Paseo does with water.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.